Welcome to Magic Club. I'm Andrew Mayne, joined by the Siegfried to my Roy, the Ann to my Teller, the Copper to my Field, Mr. Jordon Gold. Hello, Jordan.
Hello, Andrew. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. You know, Jordan, we're pre-recording these episodes of Magic Club, which means that right now the world doesn't know about it, which means that there are only 2 members of Magic Club.
Just 2.
But if you're watching this now, that means you can become a member. It's very easy. All you have to do is click subscribe on YouTube. I think somewhere around here there's a subscribe button. Subscribe to our channel and you will get all the latest updates. And if you want to be even more of an insider, we do a section after Magic Club called the Secret Session. And what this is, it's for our Patreon supporters. It's Jordan and I are our guests working on some magic. Last time we worked on some cool iPhone stuff. You taught us how to do Siri Finale, and we did some other cool things you can use with your iPhone. Today, in the Secret Session, after we do Magic Club, what are we going to be working on, Jordan?
I think we're gonna get into some rubber band magic a little bit.
Rubber band magic?
It's shocking. I know. Of all people. Here's a little tease. There's some rubber bands we're gonna talk about. But one of the most popular tricks in the last decade has been what we know as Crazy Man's handcuffs, and we probably all know that name. But lesser known is the Great Rubber Band Escape, which actually I have a little book here from Chris Kenner. This is just a booklet that he put out.
Oh, wow.
There's only a few of these floating around, and I have a little story actually of how I got to this. So we'll talk about all that in the secret sessions. We'll open this up. We'll take a look. We'll talk about the history, and it also pertains to some of the stuff that I think we're going to talk about in this episode as well, in regards to tips on the trick itself and also how to use the trick. And I probably made more money professionally on this trick than any other trick in my repertoire. So it is very, very powerful, and we'll talk about the best ways to use it.
Awesome. No, your rubber band stuff is fantastic. I've enjoyed watching you do it. I've enjoyed learning stuff from you, and we'll get into even like what kinds of rubber bands to use and some of the other stuff. Even if you think you know the effect, I'm telling you, listening to Jordan and watching him and sessioning with him is going to be very, very educational. Let's get into the news, sir. I knew about the Crazy Man handcuffs because I saw Mr. David Copperfield perform this on live television. It was amazing.
Yes,
I think he was doing the Michael Amar performance of it or version of it. But there is an interview with David Copperfield on Forbes on their website. And the title is David Copperfield, How He Became the World's Most Successful Magician. And he's worth like $1 gajillion, and
I think it's $1.5 gajillion now at this point. But when the article came out, yeah,
it's improved. Yeah, he continuously keeps performing, and David's been performing nonstop since like the 1970s when he was a teenager, and that's kind of added up. And that's how you have your own chain of private islands, etc. In the article, David talks about his influences, and one of the things we've talked about before, you and I think I mentioned this on a Periscope session I did last night, is it's really important to draw from influences outside of your immediate field. Too many magicians are just influenced by other magicians, and that's why magic tends to look like you see one show, you feel like you've seen them all, where David cites MGM performers like Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire, directors like Alfred Hitchcock, Frank Capra, Victor Fleming, and Orson Welles, who actually introduced one of his magic specials. I mean, that's kind of awesome. And you and I both been to Brookledge, which is the kind of the really cool theater show that's in the Larson's mansion that they have there. And there's an Orson Welles chair, which getting to sit in that's kind of cool. It's a very big chair, but apparently it was just for him.
He was a big personality, you know.
He was very, very, very large in life, and just fantastic interviews too. We'll probably do like a whole dedicated episode to Orson Welles. Maybe even I talked to at Brookledge a woman who was actually an assistant for him. You know, I was actually sitting in the Orson Welles chair, made some comment about Welles, and then she started telling me stories about him. It was amazing. So they asked Copperfield, the interviewer, Chabel, talked about his creativity, where his ideas come from. And then he asked David, what are your top 3 pieces of career advice? Now, I'm not going to read all. I'll read the first word to each one, but I'm going to send you guys all to the article to read the rest of them. Passion, number 1. Number 2, preparation. Number 3, persistence. And there you go. That's from the master himself. Jordan, you've had some interactions with the great one himself.
Yeah, I love just being around David and sort of what you were talking about of getting inspiration outside of magic. If you all of these books over here on the right side, this is my magic library. Up here, there's a that's actually Roald Dahl and a couple other books up there. But then all these other books over here, these are all not magical books, and this is where the real secrets are going to come from, because you can learn the tricks from so many sources at this point. I mean, you can if you just buy Tarbell, if you buy these books right here, you have all the secrets that you're ever going to need. But everything else is going to be over here. And something that not everyone knows about David is that almost every single night after he does his 2 shows at midnight, he goes out to a movie theater and watches a different movie. And not just for entertainment, he actually sits there and sort of considers everything that's happening. And if there's a moment that makes him feel, he's kind of like, oh, hey, that was a great moment that I felt. How did they do that? How did they capture that? How can we recreate that? And he pulls inspiration constantly. And, if you think about David, he's done everything in magic, not everything, but he's done more than almost anybody. And he could just sit back and choose from any one of thousands of tricks that he has. He has literally a warehouse full of all of the magic ever, and he's still constantly improving. So if he's doing that, there's really no excuse for the rest of us to just sit back and go, well, I have my 5 tricks and, they're perfect and I don't need to change anything. Like, I think that we should always be looking for ways that we can evolve and change and add to what we're doing. And I think most of those good ideas are going to come from outside of the magic world. But these books are good too.
One of the most surreal discussions I ever had with him was about the movie Cinderella. It is a great movie.
Great movie.
Yeah, it is a great movie, but it's like I was talking to a friend, like, I talked to Copperfield. I'm like, what'd you talk about? Well, the movie Cinderella. It's a great movie because you're looking at it from how the pacing of that movie is really good, the structure of that movie is really good, and he's a guy that analyzes, gets into structure, etc., and applies it to magic. And I think that I worked on one of his TV specials when I was a teenager as a production assistant, and I saw how hard he worked, how much attention he focused on things that I did not realize were even a thing, not even a thing to be an important thing, but just details that were just absolutely, important to him, and that shows in his work. So absolutely check out that article. And I have another kind of a really cool story. This is about a med student by the name of David Elkin, or excuse me, let me get the name here, David Elkin, and it's
covering all the Magic Davids.
I know. Well, it's a very common name here. It used to be like, Howard's and Harry's. Now it's David's. So David Elkin's a med student, and he is a resident at Stony Brook Children's Hospital, where he performs for the kids and families every week on the pediatrics floor. He's actually got his own project. It's called, let me get this right, it is magic-aid.org. And he's using magic to uplift people. And it's, a very positive thing because you're dealing with people who are in a very challenging situation. You're in a hospital. It's not the most fun place to be. Although, pediatric wards have come a long ways over the years, and they've done a lot to make them more family-friendly and kid-friendly and parent-friendly. But still, it's a hospital. So David's been bringing his magic around and doing this as a way to help uplift people. And so he's got a program. You can find out more about that. And teaching children magic, teaching people magic. As you know, David Copperfield, there's Project Magic, which is a great program for doing rehabilitative, to helping people learn how to get use back of their hands. I've had friends who've had injuries, and I've said, well, check this out, and showed them the exercises and stuff that you can do there. And I found, anecdotally, I've had 2 friends that had like severe hand trauma that were told they would never regain full use, but they regained complete use of their hands, and they both were magicians. And I wondered if that had something to do with the fact that as magicians, we're used to doing really unconventional things with our hands and doing a lot of repetitious movements. Was this an experience you would agree with?
It could be, yeah. Well, was one of your friends Doctor Strange, by the way? Because I think he went through the same thing with it, right?
But I wasn't going to mention him because he's still kind of a little moody about that whole thing.
Yeah, and personally, I also am a musician and I play violin, and I think that's everything that you can do to add to your movement. And it's not just your hands, it's your whole body. I mean, if you move your body and use it, it it rewards you. You know, if you just sit there, it stagnates and everything cramps up, and then you just become basically you turn into stone pretty
Right.
much. But yeah, there's, one of the things that we don't realize, especially being so passionate about magic, you immerse yourself in magic. It's like jumping into a pool. We read all the books. We listen to the super exclusive magic podcasts that have only 2 members so far. We do all these things, but there's so many people out there who aren't close to magic, don't get to see magic all the time. And it really is a gift to bring this to other people, especially those who don't have the opportunities to go see shows and to kind of get out there and don't know where to look to find magic. So it is something that we should continue to sort of gift to everyone, and especially when they actually want it. Don't go forcing magic on everyone thinking that you're gifting it to the world.
Pushing the doctors and nurses out of the way. No,
yeah,
I got
you
this.
guys, I'm a
Sponge
gift of
balls.
humankind, please. Yes, you know who I am. But it is truly special when you sort of realize that not everyone gets the access and is as close to magic as we are, and it can be a really a wonderful thing to give to somebody.
One of the things that I discovered in teaching magic to kids in hospitals is that it's empowerment. It's one of these things, if you teach a kid how to do a magic trick and how to fool an adult, because all day long, everybody has power over them. Their parents, the nurses, the doctors, they're getting pushed from room to room, and they don't have a sense of control. And you find that children have to spend a lot of time in hospitals. They tend to sort of regress. They don't develop often emotionally as well as their peers outside who are being challenged more and put in situations where they're able to make their own decisions. But if you give a kid a magic trick, if you teach them how to do magic, and they're in that situation, they do feel a little bit more of control. They're able to assert themselves a little bit more, and that's been one of the positive things I've seen through that, besides the therapeutic and the rehabilitative, is just socially speaking. So anyhow, I recommend you guys check out, if you want, David Elkin and the story there, and we're going to put a link to that, which I think is just, look for ways you can positively use your magic. How can you use it to help people? And you find that some of the best have, and these are things I haven't done, and I haven't done enough of this, but like, when I lived in Florida, a hurricane went through. I went and did magic for, a bunch of children of people who were, had their homes, just totally devastated. And it was the most appreciated audience I ever had. Most appreciative audience I've ever had were those kids, and going into places where people aren't expecting to have somebody bring some fun. I mean, yeah, make sure you're welcome there. But going to those places can be one of the most rewarding things you can do.
And you can empower people in your performance too, by doing very little to just reframe the trick. So when I do a card trick, if somebody signs it, you can just give them the pen, and that's the magic wand, and that little gesture will change the entire situation from, hey, look how great I am, I can make the card jump around, to, hey, you guys are doing this. I mean, you can really give people the power in your performance, which, works well for adults, but it works really well for kids. And give it a try. See what routines, what tricks you're already doing. Try and make them about other people for at least one performance, and just see how that goes. It'll be a big change.
ABC7 Chicago has a nice embedded video, an interview with, they call him Suburban Magician Bill Cook. I love Bill. You know Bill, right?
I know Bill. Not super well. I've seen him at a couple magic conventions, and I saw him in the documentary, of course.
Bill's wonderful. Bill has been on Masters of Illusion. He was on Penn and Teller Fool Us. And they have a really nice interview, a sit-down interview with Bill. You can check it out. And Bill's super cool. His mom is really fun. His mom is a trip, too.
His mom's great. I actually know. I think I've spent more time talking to his mom than I have to Bill, which is kind of fun, because she's always around the castle when he's in town. He's off performing in the showroom, and she's just being awesome at the bar and hanging out with all the magicians.
Great personality, great people. So the whole family there. But it's nice to see this, and you see that Bill's a great magician, technically great magician, but he's just this charming, likable guy. you listen to him talk for 30 seconds, you're like, I want to be this guy's friend. And so you'll see that in the video. So very, very cool to see Bill doing this great interview there. So there's going to be a link there to the AB7 Chicago interview with Bill Cook. And we'll get Bill on here. So Jordan, what else is new in the world of Magic?
Derek DelGaudio's show just got announced for a New York run. He did.
Tell us about Derek DelGaudio's show, first of all.
It is called In and of Itself, and he presented it here at the Geffen, which is a pretty great theater in Los Angeles, very well known. It's not high end's not the right word for it, but really very theatrical. And it's an intimate theater as well. I think it seats about 100 people. And this show got extended, I think, 4 times.
Wow.
They couldn't stop people from wanting to come see it. It was just selling out every single night. And I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to go see it, and it's pretty phenomenal what he's doing in the show. You kind of have to go see it. It's not as easily describable as, he made a car appear in midair. That's the type of Vegas magic that we know about.
In the last show that he did, and describe the last show he did prior to that.
The last show was
Nothing to Hide.
Nothing to Hide. Thank you. Yes, Nothing to Hide with Helder Guimaraes, which they did in the Magic Castle in the Peller. It was a show they put together, and it immediately just had crazy buzz all around it because it was such a phenomenal show. And they had lines going for 3 hours in advance of people waiting to get into these shows.
I saw it in New York City, and it's a full show that's just card tricks, and I'm like, really? A whole show that's just card tricks? I'm like, all right, I'll go see what people are talking about. I'll go see what this buzz is about. And literally, talk about a buzzed about show. In my row, there's Woody Allen. That's how everybody's going to see this thing. So it was phenomenal. It was excellent. It was wonderful. They had the character, the ways the two of them interplayed was really, really well done. I walked out of going, I'm convinced. I'm a believer. It was like, and I heard this guy, David Blaine, was going to do a TV special just with street magic. I'm like, what? Close-up magic on TV? That's not going to work. I was wrong, and delightfully so. And so now Derek is doing his own one-man show, and that's going to be opening, you said, in New York.
It's in New York. Yeah, it's directed by Frank Oz. It's produced by Neil Patrick Harris. And it is...
Frank Oz, voice unique. Of Yoda. Frank Oz, who's also been a director, and was a puppeteer for a number of years for the Muppets, and so an incredible talent. So Derek working with Frank Oz himself is pretty cool. And you said Neil Patrick Harris, who's a lover of magic, is involved.
And Neil was the past president at the Magic Castle, and he's been involved in Magic and Magic Castle pretty much his whole life. When he was a little kid, he used to hang out with Ed Alonzo from Saved by the Bell and at Ed's warehouse where he had all these magic props. So there's a long history of magic there. And if you have an opportunity to see Derek's show, go see it. It's completely different than anything anyone else has done in Magic, and it'll give you a completely different perspective on everything. You will come out of that show changed in one way or another. So, and
Positively.
There's not a lot of shows that you can say that about. So, it is very, very special for that.
Sir, let's move on let's talk a little about Magic business. I think this is a segment we want to do from time to time because when I've done other shows or talked about Magic elsewhere, frequently one of the most popular questions I get is business-related stuff. And by the way, if you have questions you want to send to us, you can send them to magicclub@itricks.com. That's magicclub@itricks.com. And be sure to tell us your member number and your lodge number, and you can make all of those up, and the name of your Magic Club lodge, just so we know.
And the sooner you join Magic Club, the more exclusive it'll be, because right now there's only 2 members. So you could be the third and be part of an extremely exclusive club. So, get in while the getting's good.
Exactly. And even when it's bigger, still join. Jordan, when did you start charging for shows?
My first show I ever charged for was I was 13 or 14 years old, and it was um, a friend's parent hired me for their bar mitzvah. So I may have been like 15, a little older than that, but I was hired for a bar mitzvah. They offered me $100 to
Nice.
walk around and do some magic. And as a kid, I'm thinking this is awesome because I'm doing magic for free at school for kids. I'm desperate for an audience, so I'm happy to just do magic for anyone. And now somebody wants to pay me $100 bill, what, to go perform. And of course, my mom is hilarious, typical Jewish mom. When I told her the news of how exciting I was, she goes, "Well, they're probably paying more for the napkins than they're paying for you." I'm like, "Well, thanks, mom." And that has always stuck in my brain. I can't like get that image out of my mind that I always want to be getting paid more than what the napkins are worth. So that's the first piece of advice. Charge more than the napkins. And that's a good way to sort of gauge how fancy of a party it is too. If they spent $50 on the napkins, you can go from there. But if they spent, $500, then there you go.
There's a whole technique of, about the technique of like how to price your show just by asking questions, not what's your budget or how much you want to spend, but where's it being held? Who else is going to be there? You have any musical acts? And if it's somebody who won a Grammy, then you just add another $5,000 to your price. Are the napkins? Are they paper or are they cloth? I mean, these are things you can ask.
Are they custom? Are they embroidered? Do they have gold foil on them?
Mm-hmm. Is this for a party for somebody who's got the first name of like Sultan in front of their title? And that's one of the ways in which I've heard very skillful performers and negotiators are able to ask exorbitant prices because they figure out what the total overall budget is and they're able to throw out a number that nobody balks at. So you started doing bar mitzvahs. Did that lead to others?
Yeah, it led to a couple other ones. Back then I wasn't even thinking about doing magic full time or professionally. I just, I didn't even think about the idea that magic was a job back then. I just was so excited to be performing. And I was excited to get a gig, And so I did a couple other parties, and most of them were families would hire me for their kids' birthday parties. Pretty typical, I think, story for most magicians, working family, friends, birthday parties, all that sort of stuff. And at the time, it felt like, yeah, all right, I have like a show, like it's a real show versus just practicing and performing for friends. I didn't really think about it as business and money and all that until after college or starting in college, and then thinking, this could actually be the thing that I do instead of getting a real job.
Well, that leads to my next question: is when did you decide to go pro?
So I decided to go pro about 4 years ago or so. When I first moved to LA after college, that was 7 years ago. I was bartending at really beautiful cocktail lounges and creating cocktails and drinks for menus and incorporating magic and themes into the cocktails and into the bar as well, and performing over the bar, which was a great way to make money. I mean, you get handed cash at the end of every night, and if you're doing magic, you're making a lot more tips than if you're just standing there pouring drinks all night long. But it's tough to be behind a bar for a long time. You're standing on your feet 10 hours a day, if not more. And especially in Hollywood and the clubs, it's dark, it's loud, you're staying out late. It's a difficult lifestyle to sustain. And so eventually, most people get out from behind the bar. They get into managing a bar or working for liquor brands or something else. And I kind of just decided, I ended up managing a distillery downtown, and I decided I don't want to be working in an office on a computer my whole life. In 10 years, I'm going to still be sitting here, working at my computer, not doing magic, not thinking about magic. And if I want to change things, now is the time to do it. And so I made that leap. And there's a great Ray Bradbury quote. It's leap and you'll figure out how to unfold your wings on the way down. Something like that. I'm paraphrasing. It's pretty close to that. But that sort of stuck with me. And it's over the years, there's other iterations of that, jump in the net will appear, those sort of things. They sound almost cliche and kind of fantastical, but you kind of have to do that because
I I would say that I've this was a question like ever since I started doing, was it like the Magic Radio show years and years ago, we would get that question periodic from people about wanting to go pro. And one of the questions that I would ask people was, are you getting booked now? Are people my suggestion was you go pro when you're getting booked so much it interferes with your day job. And I have people who have like really nice day jobs, they're going to have pensions and stuff, and they have this fantasy of like, well, I want to become a pro magician and I want to do this, and not realizing it's not for everybody. If you're not into entrepreneurship, if you're not self-motivated, and I know a number of people who aren't really self-motivated who think like, well, I'll just become a magician, I'll do shows. I think they'll just put an ad, back then, put an ad in the phone book or get, Google ads or whatever, and the shows are going to come rolling in and they can say F you to their bosses or whatever. And that's not the reality for most people. I mean, there are two questions that one you love to hear, one you hate to hear. One is if you're starting out, when people go, oh, how do we hire you? And if you're an amateur, that's great. Like, wow, they think I'm a pro. What you don't want to hear is a pro when they go, well, what's your real job? And
yeah,
like, oh,
well, and there's a great quote about an entrepreneur is somebody who's willing to work 100 hours a week so they don't have to work a 40-hour-a-week job.
Yep. I've had people who've asked me that question about when they're ready to go get started as a pro, and I've had to ask those questions like how much work is coming to you or not, because they have, again, that fantasy, and you have to be a real self-starter to get these things going.
Well, and the other is you have to really believe in yourself and what you're doing and put the work in and know that it's going to pay off, because what the trade-off of getting to perform magic and think about magic 100% of the time and work for yourself and all that is you're sacrificing the consistency of a regular job. I don't know that I'm going to go into this exact same place and do this exact same job at this exact same time for the exact same amount of money. And so there's months where, I look at my calendar and almost every month at this point, I know it gets busier, but I look at my calendar and I go, I don't have anything, it's empty. I don't have anything planned. And that's scary today, but retrospectively at the end of that month, I look back and I've done a ton of things, because once you start, building your community and reaching out and having clients and people know you, you never know when you're going to get a call. And part of being professional is being able to get that call and say, yeah, I can work for you on that day. Absolutely. Because that's what I do. I'm available for hire. And when you have a job, you end up having to say no to all those things because you can't just take work off randomly. So the first part for me was just clearing everything out, being available and saying, okay, I have this open schedule. And that's sort of a scary thing to say, I have no idea what I'm going to do in the next month. I better start reaching out and trying to fill all of those days with something, whether it's doing a creative project, maybe you're working on a download or something, or coming out with a new trick, or it's just, I just want to book shows and I'm going to try and get people to hire me for their event. Or maybe you want a regular show and you reach out and try and find a venue or a restaurant gig or something. There's lots of ways to do magic and to make money from it. And when you have an open schedule and you have nothing else to think about or occupy your time, that's when you make the full commitment because you have to.
The thing for me in being a stage performer was that a lot of the work I had to do to put in and get in shows, it could be 6 months before you would get a return on that. If it was trying to work on cruise ships, it was sending your videos out to casting agents, sending your videos out to the people who were booking for ships. And those openings, it wasn't like they happened every couple weeks. They happened every 4 or 5 months or so, or sometimes once a year. And that was the challenge, was learning early on, like you have to be planning a year ahead to try to book things. And I'm a person that hates to sort of plan that far ahead, which meant I was maybe not well matched from that. The best situations I found were people that really liked me and wanted to have me keep returning every 6 months or so. But that's another thing you have to think about, is that if you're doing stage magic, you have to have a lot of lead time, because if like the bigger the show or the bigger the audience, often these things are planned much further out beforehand. So that's a thing to keep in mind. So Jordan, is there anything you're working on right now? Any particular magic or anything in the field that's been keeping you up late at night with a notebook, or just sitting with some props or something, or
Yeah, I've been working a lot on stack deck work. I don't know if that's too big of a secret to say. The memorized deck,
You can
and
say that.
I can say that. Okay,
Yes.
that's a little secret. I've got some books over here on it. I've done a lot with organized stacks and mathematical stacks, and the memorized stuff I think is fascinating. Not just the card tricks, but also just techniques in general for memory and mnemonic devices and all that. It's stuff I've dabbled in over time, and I'm friends with a lot of guys in the puzzle world, and some of them are 80, 90 years old, and they're sharp as tacks because they just use their brain for everything. They don't sit back and relax. They really exercise this muscle, and I worry about getting older, Andrew. I
It
wanna
happens.
be able to.
I think if you're using both sides of your brain and keep challenging yourself, it certainly is good. Now, if I was a beginner and I wanted to start somewhere with like a stack deck, what does this mean, or whatever, where would I start?
Stebbins for sure. It's super approachable, and there's a lot of great work out there. One of the biggest pieces of advice I can give is don't try to recreate the wheel every single time you approach a new trick. I feel like there's a lot of guys out there who are excited about being creators because there's a lot of creators out there right now, but there's also so much material, and you can pick up hundreds of different books on Cy Stebbins and just start with everything else that's out there. It's way easier to just read what other people have put the effort into than it is to try and figure out new stuff.
I get that periodically people come to me with something, and often they're very new at Magic. Oh, I've got this new thing. Have you seen this thing before? And sometimes it's something like, no, I haven't seen that before, but it's not good. It's not like, what are you? And I'm like, well, this is a thing that's probably a better version of what you're trying to do. And we fall in love with our own idea. We fall in love with that. And I think it's always, as a creator, I think it's always important to say, what am I trying to do? Not just put something new into the universe, but trying to solve a problem that hasn't been addressed. I have one stacked deck effect out there. You know about this? My zero memorization deck. Because I couldn't memorize an entire deck or a stack or even a pattern. And I wanted to come up with a very simple way to do it and to quickly set something up that I could do this effect to this day because it's a super simple way to do it. And it's like, I call it the zero memorization deck because it's like basically just uses your phone number, and that's how you set up your stack.
Oh, wow.
And that for me was like my solution towards heart, spades, clubs, diamonds, or it's a hearts, clubs, spades, diamond. It's like I would get those little things confused. So I did practice for a while trying to remember. Like I taught myself, I came up with my own mnemonic, associating numbers and suits with words and phrases. And I came up with my own mnemonic that worked really well. And I could sit there with a deck of cards and probably memorize an entire deck of cards. It took me like 3 minutes, and there are guys who do it like super fast, but I could memorize a deck in 3 minutes and go recall the entire deck. But I found out that I would retain like 3 or 4 decks in my head. Like, because I'd mix them up, then I'd try it again, mix them up, try it again, doing that. And I would go to bed at night, and all I would see was the sequence of cards, and that drove me nuts. I'm like, this is not for me. This is not the world I want to live in.
Yeah. What I really like about working on this stuff as well is for a long time I avoided it because false shuffles were scary to me. Because I spent so much time just practicing regular shuffles and really mixing a deck. And if you see a lot of the guys at the castle hanging around, they're all just shuffling and just sort of fiddling. They're not practicing anything. They're just nervously playing with the deck. And it took me a while to stop doing that and to start actively practicing when I have a deck in my hand. So instead of shuffling, I'm always false shuffling. Even if I'm not using that move, even if it's a shuffled deck, I'll false shuffle it because why not? It's kind of the similar thing is if you have someone pick a card, always try and classic force a card. Just always practicing.
That's a very good point.
Getting to work on false shuffles, that's one of the other things I'm working on right now. It's sort of in relation to that. And every day I'm picking up a new one,
That's a great point, is to always be practicing, and the idea of every time you let somebody pick a card, even if it's a free choice, try to do a classic force, because there are people who I watch it do, and it is just effortless. And it is one of those things, it is hard to teach in a certain sense, because I notice that there are things that I watch people who are brilliant at it that they don't realize they're doing, of just how far out they reach the cards, how they watch for the movement of the person's hand, how they're watching, let's say, the wrist move or something. They're aware of something else when somebody's going in to reach a card that often isn't taught, because they're not even this body language. There's a thing called micro gestures, which are these very almost subliminal gestures that people give off, and how we read each other. And we'll be like, are you angry? And where these things come from. And we talked about this in the last session. You mentioned the dribble force and Frank Olivier's points about that, and that was a very good example of probably like how a micro expression can help you understand that. And that's helpful advice. Sir, it's time now for our Magician of the Week.
Ooh.
Our magician this week is Howard Thurston. I'm going to read a little bit from his Wikipedia, and then I have a very interesting connection that I probably was aware of and then completely forgot about. Howard Thurston was born July 20th, 1869, and passed away April 13th, 1936. This same year, our last magician of the week, Carter, died. He was a stage magician from Columbus, Ohio, United States. His childhood was unhappy, and he ran away to join the circus, where his future partner, Harry Keller, also performed. Thurston was deeply impressed after he attended magician Alexander Herman's magic show and was determined to equal his work. He eventually became the most famous magician of his time. Thurston's traveling magic show was the biggest one of all. It was so large that it needed 8 train cars to transport his road show. He was the son of William Henry Thurston, a wheelwright and carriage maker who served briefly as a private during the Civil War in the 3rd Ohio Regiment. He attended Mount Hermon School for Boys in Northfield, Massachusetts, class of 1893. Among his fellow students was Lee DeForest, the father of American radio, and musical humorist Charles Ross Taggart, the old country fiddler. He's still famous for his work with playing cards. According to legend, a Mexican magician appeared at a magic shop owned by Otto Mauer in New York City. The enigmatic magician demonstrated how he could make cards disappear one by one at his fingertips. Mauer showed Thurston the move, which he would later feature in his act. He added the rising cards trick from Professor Hoffman's Modern Magic, the book from which Thurston had learned the rudiments of magic. For this trick, he would walk into the audience and ask several people to choose cards from a deck of cards. The deck was shuffled and placed into a clear glass. Thurston would then call for the chosen card. One by one, the cards would rise up to the top of the deck. Thurston arranged an impromptu audition with Leon Herman, nephew of Alexander Herman. His performances fooled Leon. From that point on, he called himself the man that fooled Herman, and used the publicity to get booked into top vaudeville houses in the U.S. and Europe, billing himself as the King of Cards. Thurston became well known for performing a floating lady illusion known as the levitation of Princess Karnak. The illusion was originally performed by John Neville Maskelyne and most famously by Harry Keller. Magic historian and our hero Jim Steinmeier has written that in Thurston's hands, the levitation of Prince Karnak became a masterpiece. The beautiful trick was perfectly suited to Thurston's lyrical baritone. By 1908, the levitation illusion was sought by famous magicians. It was duplicated by Charles Joseph Carter. We talked about that, how he kind of underhandedly, snuck it away on a world tour, and it had an interested magician, Chung Ling Soo. In his later years, Thurston continued presenting the Thurston Keller Show following the retirement of Keller. He continued presenting for about 35 years until on March 30th, 1936, he suffered a stroke from a cerebral hemorrhage. He died on April 13th at his Oceanside apartment in Miami Beach. The death was attributed to pneumonia. Now, here is where we get into a little interesting thing. Thurston is quoted in Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Have you ever read the book?
I have read the book, and I forgot about that part.
Yeah, so same with me. I remember reading it and going, oh, cool, a magician story about Thurston. So I'm going to read the passage from there. And
fantastic.
I spent an evening in the dressing room of Howard Thurston the last time he appeared on Broadway. Thurston was the acknowledged dean of magicians. For 40 years, he had traveled all over the world, time and again, creating illusions, mystifying audiences, and making people gasp with astonishment. More than 60 million people had paid admission to his show, and he had made almost $2 million in profit. I asked Mr. Thurston to tell me the secrets of his success. His schooling certainly had nothing to do with it, for he ran away from home as a small boy, became a hobo, that was a job back then, rode in boxcars, slept in haystacks, begged his food from door to door, and learned to read by looking out of boxcars at signs along the railway. Did he have a superior knowledge of magic? No. He told me hundreds of books had been written about legerdemain, and scores of people knew as much about it as he did, but he had two things that the others didn't have. First, he had the ability to put his personality across the footlights. He was a master showman. He knew human nature. Everything he did, every gesture, every intonation of his voice, every lifting of an eyebrow had been carefully rehearsed in advance, and his actions were timed to split seconds. But in addition to that, Thurston had a genuine interest in people. He told me that many magicians would look at the audience and say to themselves, well, there's a bunch of suckers out there, a bunch of hicks. I'll fool them all right. But Thurston's method was totally different. He told me that every time he went on stage, he said to himself, I am grateful because these people came to see me. They make it possible for me to make a living in a very agreeable way. I'm going to give them the very best I possibly can. He declared he never stepped in front of the footlights without first saying to himself over and over, I love my audience. I love my audience. Ridiculous? Absurd? You are privileged to think anything you like. I merely pass it on to you without comment as a recipe used by one of the most famous magicians of all time. It's kind of a really cool thing.
Pretty great.
Yeah.
And, at the Magic Castle, we have themed weeks on occasion, and they did a History of Magic week. They do one every year, but a couple years ago, Jonathan Levitt did a recreation performance as Thurston.
Oh, wow.
And he did the rising cards and several other effects as well as Thurston, and it was put together by Mike Caveney and Jim Steinmeier. And it was pretty amazing to kind of get a little glance back into history.
Now, it's interesting because when you think about, within magic, we, of course, know of a number of magicians from that period. But, outside of that, not so well known. But I would say that, Thurston certainly influenced, a lot of what we consider sort of the modern magician or, the archetypal magician. I would certainly say that, Blackstone. And one of the things I love was Thurston would spin the cards out in the audience, right?
Mm-hmm.
He had like the Thurston Lucky cards, which is just a really cool thing. And I just saw Jeff McBride do that, which was you watched an entire audience full of adults act like kids trying to grab these cards because it was a part of the magic on stage touching the people out of the audience. And that was kind of a really neat thing that Thurston did and, a way to sort of make things sort of touch. And if you look in the books, there's the Thurston method of card spinning.
And he used to shoot them to the back balcony, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Apparently, he would just, hit them everywhere, all over, which is kind of pretty awesome.
And it's the funny thing about that is that story perpetuate. I mean, that's one of the things that people talked about with Thurston. Of all the, levitating people and all the grand illusions he did, throwing the cards to the top of the balcony was one of those things that has perpetuated over time. And it's just sort of a good thing to remember that sometimes things that maybe seem, simple or trivial to us make a big impact on people. Mm-hmm. So it's important to pay attention to all those things and maybe try and listen after a show to what people are talking about and picking up on.
I remember I had a friend describe to me when he went to go see Doug Henning. And Doug Henning vanished a number of rings and then made them reappear on a ribbon in a loaf of bread. And my friend was impressed, and he said, and the bread was even fresh. And the smell of the bread. And I'm thinking, well, that would make it technically less of a miracle, right? If it was stale old bread, I mean, the bread had been sitting there, if it was fresh, without getting any kind of method or whatever. But it was an interesting thing, the fact that it was a scent. And I analyzing why that was significant to him, I thought, well, because he could smell it. And that made that memory of that effect that much stronger. Now, the fact that you could smell the bread, in theory, if that was part of the method, that there was a baker backstage or something like that. I have no idea how the effect was done, so I'm not going to spoil anything here. But point is that it was such a strong scent memory. And I know that like Copperfield's working with some of that stuff and some of the stuff he does. I don't want to tip anything in his show, just go see the show. But that's sort of an interesting detail. Like I mentioned, McBride doing the card scaling, other magicians doing that. It brings that thing out into the audience and becomes, affects you in some other way besides just what you're seeing. Sir, it is time now for us to do picks. Do you have a pick? Do you have some sort of pick? Do you want me to lead off?
Stuff. Okay.
Yes.
This week, I've got a book and we were talking a little bit about magic business earlier. This
Mm-hmm.
is The Approach by Jamie D. Grant. And if you are serious about doing magic as a profession, or even semi as a profession, if you want to make money from magic, you should have this book in your library. It's one of the easiest books to read that I've come across, not because it's simple, but because it's so well laid out.
Mm-hmm.
It reads more like a workbook than like an instruction manual. It his Jamie's thoughts are really well put together about how to approach magic as a business, how to look at the tricks that you're doing, how to organize the tricks that you're doing, how to talk to clients, what to do at a gig. Some really creative ideas in here as well. There's a lot of things in here that I personally don't use or haven't tried yet, but made me think about some of the other things that I do use. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to give too much away, but this is, I don't buy a lot of magic books these days because I have access as a member of the Academy of Magical Arts to the Magic Castle library, which is extensive and has
Mm-hmm.
almost any book that you could ever want to read on magic is in there. And I thought, well, I'll just go by and read this. And I picked this book up in the library. I read the first chapter, and then I immediately knew, okay, I have to own this book
Wow.
because I've gone back to this book time and time again. I read through it, and then I go back and I reference it. I've recommended this to all sorts of
Can
magicians.
you
And,
can you give us like some of the chapter headlines?
I will. Let's see here. We have how many tricks should you know?
Mm.
That's number one. That's the first chapter, and that's a really great topic right there. And
Yeah.
he goes into fantastic detail. Also, I believe it still should be available. Jamie has the first half of this book, I think, just about is available online for free. You can download it. So just go check that out, and then after you do that, you're going to want the rest of it also. But how many tricks should you know? Who are you? Developing your sets. How to practice. Your Magic Fridays. Jamie does a weekly magic thing called Magic Friday. He talks a lot about that. Business cards, websites. How do you look? What to wear? Funny or serious? Are you any good yet? Starting conversations, etc. And it goes all the way down from the moment that you're ready to perform. I know 5 tricks. Okay, I want to perform for people. To what to do after the gig.
Mm-hmm.
It's totally covered in depth, everything, not just booking gigs, not just how much to charge, but everything. And it's not an outline for what you should do. It's really a lot of tips to find out what works for you and what to try. And this is one of those things that as soon as I bought it and read it, I immediately could feel all the time that had passed without me having this book, and I felt
Mm-hmm.
sad about that. So if you don't have it, go get it. And I'm not, this is my recommendation. Jamie doesn't know I'm doing this right now. I'm sure he'll be happy, but this has
Excellent.
been one of the most useful books that I've picked up in the last couple years.
My recommendation is the book Born Standing Up by Steve Martin. Steve Martin, world famous magician, or excuse me, comedian and actor, started off as a magician, and it's a great story of how he went through an evolution from being a guy who loved magic and loved, kind of these sort of funny gags and bits like that, and how he evolved into a comedian and evolved into an actor. And it's a very personal story, and it talks about, going to see, the magic shop at Disneyland, working at Knott's Berry's farm, and just his experience and his way of which, you have a set list from his magic show inside of there. And to realize this is a guy who's one of the most famous people in the world, how much magic was a big part of him becoming an entertainer and what he took away from that. It's awesome to see him sort of as he gets more into comedy and understanding what makes people laugh. He's an extremely analytical person who loves philosophy, who loves science, and who loves art. And you look underneath this wild and crazy guy was a very calculated, very analytical person putting together a persona based upon what he analyzed around him. And it started with his magic and how he looked at that and put that together. I recommend this book to everybody, especially anybody in entertainment. And if you're a magician and you have not read this book, you really should read Born Standing Up by Steve Martin. You can get it on Audible where he actually reads it to you. So That's my pick. One of my all-time picks is just Born Standing Up. Jordan, have you read it?
I have. It's fantastic. I recommend it. Steve Martin's just amazing.
Yeah. Well, I think it's time to, we're going to adjourn this session of the Magic Club, and we're going to go to the secret session, and you're going to show us the work on
some rubber band tricks, specifically the Great Rubber Band Escape / Crazy Man's Handcuffs. We'll talk about how it picked up that name, how to do it, tips. If you know this trick already and you do it all the time, you will love what I'm about to show you. The tips that we're going to go over, I have shown to professional magicians at the Magic Castle who you have heard of, and they were very grateful for my info on this. So these are some real inside secrets that took me years to sort of tweak and figure out, and you're going to get them now, and you're going to be able to put them straight into your show and give them a try, because they will improve greatly upon this trick.
Fantastic. Sir, I call this meeting of Magic Club to a close.
Invisible gavel.